interesting thing about her is how much she looks like Catherine. Adventurers Guild Catherine. Now, if you've ever been to one of my streams, you've probably heard my whole theory about how all the Catherines are just robots being puppeted by a remote operator somewhere. They say error and rebooting all the time, and the Adventurers Guild is actually headquartered in Shnezhnaya. And look at all these little subtle similarities between the two. They've got a similar haircut, the bonnet, the way the bust line is cut, the style of dress, the collar, the crossed hands. It's actually very possible that Sandrone is operating the Adventurers Guild. That would make her an intelligence agent, and she therefore wouldn't need to be all that strong herself, you know? That also makes Sandrone, aka Marionette, number 10 of the Fatui Harbingers, with the Marionette as her constellation. I'm just gonna say it because we're all thinking it. Pantalone has massive Baiju vibes. And I regret to inform you that there's actually more to this theory than just their looks. Like, okay, yes, Baiju and Pantalone have similar glasses, hair, speech patterns, and sussy little smiles, but it's also possible that they are both from Liyue. This is because Pantalone's backstory parallels Ningguang's. Both of them grew up extremely poor, only to become extremely wealthy later on. The difference is Ningguang really loves Mora, truly, and loves earning it, and according to the Pale Flame set, Pantalone kind of resents it even though he lusts after it. He sees control of the financial sector, not because he likes money necessarily, but because he sees it as the heart that beats around the world, and his goal is to force that heart to stop beating by his will alone. He also runs the Northland Bank, so Pantalone could be easily linked back to Liyue just because he has so many fingers in that pie, like a suspicious amount. And here's the thing. The constellation that I'm pretty sure belongs to him is the open palm with a spiral. This, as far as I can tell, is a Native American symbol from the Hopi tribe known as the Healing Hand, and it also may be a reference to Jainism's Ahimsa hand, which is from India, which represented a vow of non-violence. But the constellation itself has detached fingers, which make it look a bit more like a handprint. And you'd get the biggest gaps between the palm and the fingers if you were wearing a lot of rings, which Pantalone is on his left hand. If this is not a handprint, then his constellation would actually be depicting his right hand, upon which he is only wearing one ring on his ring finger, and lo and behold, the one finger on the constellation that differs from the other is the ring finger. Now, in some Eastern religions, men wear their wedding rings on their right hand, which would line up here. And guess what? Baiju and Changsheng, his snake, are based on the myth of the immortal white snake, wherein a white snake demon took human form and married a pharmacist. Which means that Changsheng could be Baiju's waifu. That would also mean that Pantalone is married, which doesn't really quite seem like, Hoyo versus style, but whatever. It is suspicious, in addition to this, that he's referenced in Yelan's story quest, though, especially if he has a connection to Baiju, because Yelan frequents the pharmacy, but only does so in a lot of different disguises. Can you imagine these two interacting regularly, both under different aliases and different disguises? It's hysterical. Absolutely hysterical. But the problem with this is that Arlecchino basically says straight up that Pantalone doesn't leave Shnezhnaya very often, so Baiju being a disguise of his wouldn't really work unless Baiju is some kind of avatar that gets piloted remotely and is overseen by Changsheng. That would explain why everyone says he's sick even though he doesn't show any symptoms, and why he's not around the pharmacy all that often, and why his most trusted companion is a conveniently forgetful zombie, and why Zhongli doesn't really recognize him even though that guy remembers everything, and also why Baiju isn't playable yet, or even in the forecast for the playable future. What? But, even then, Pantalone does not have a vision. So if this does end up being true, then Baiju's vision will actually be fake, or maybe a disguised illusion. It's complicated. And okay, sure, one of Pantalone's rings looks a bit like this constellation instead, the heresy symbol, but Comedia's Pantalone and Dottore are actually very closely linked to each other, sometimes even alter egos of each other. So I'm not going to use this as evidence to suggest that this is Pantalone's constellation when I think it's Dottore's. Instead, I would like to propose that these two are actually quite close to each other. So that's my take on Pantalone, aka Regrater, the 9th of the Fatui Harbingers in charge of economic policies, owner of the Open Hand constellation. So Signora is actually dead. Dead. I'm not even really on the hopium she might come back as Rosalind train anymore. She's pretty dead, deader than I thought she was. Piero even straight up says that wherever the Fatui are going, Rosalind is not gonna be there with them, so... And I have no idea what's in that coffin since she was like vaporized, but what's really interesting about this is that her coffin has a lot of similarities with the Unified Civilizations architecture, so like Enkanomiya and the buildings in the chasm. And it's not just the coffin that has similar architecture, and that has some really neat implications that we'll kind of talk about a little bit later, but not a whole lot. Just, it's a neat observation, I guess. I don't know if I really need to explain her backstory, do I? By now, everyone should know that she was a citizen of Mondstadt 500 years ago who studied in the Sumeru Academia and then turned herself into the Crimson Witch of Flames out of rage and grief when her lover Rostam died in the Cataclysm. I mean, she was recruited after that, and then she stole 2 Gnosis and got vaporized by the Shogun. That's basically the whole story. She is now very dead. So, pour one out for La Senora, aka the Fair Lady, number 8 of the Fatui Harbingers, a diplomat of Shnezhnaya, and the Moth Constellation. Ah, yes, Arlecchino, Twitter's new darling. Arlecchino runs the House of Hearth Orphanage in Shnezhnaya, where she raises and trains orphans to be outstanding soldiers of the Fatui. Basically, everything we know about her comes from this quest with Gendo Ringo, who, well, I won't actually spoil it for you. If you go to this place in Inazuma, you can trigger the quest and explore it for yourself. I highly recommend it, but just know that it's like literally time-gated and it takes a few days. Her title, the Knave, is a term usually reserved for young male servants or young androgynous servants, or it can be another name for the Jack in a deck of playing cards. Of the 3 face cards within a normal deck, the Jack is always the lowest rank within the royal court. Now, I do concede that this would usually put her around rank 4, I guess, but her competition for the rank is with Dottore and Capitano, and I struggle to see her being stronger than either of them, honestly. Besides, she addresses both Pantalone and Puccinella, numbers 9 and 5 respectively, in such a way that makes me think her rank would sit in between them, and the only open number there is 7. I did originally rank her at number 2 in a previous video because in the Commedia, Arlecchino and Piero are generally equals, so rank 2 just made sense. But I started to realize that while the physical traits of the Harbingers are pretty faithful to the Commedia, their personality quirks are kinda contrary. I already mentioned one instance of this with Pantalone, who in the Commedia loves and adores money, while Harbinger Pantalone seems to love it on the surface but actually kind of resents it. Another example is Tartaglia, who in the Commedia is an old man who's a bit slow and talks with a stutter, while the Harbinger Tartaglia is the youngest of the lot, outgoing and silver-tongued. This makes me think that something similar is going on with Arlecchino and that she may not actually consider Piero a rival or an equal at all. It would therefore not make sense for her to be his near equal in strength at number 2. I'm far more confident about her constellation than her rank, though. After my last video, it was brought to my attention that the clawed hand is actually called a Hand of Glory, which is kinda gross, actually. It was the severed hand of a dead man, thief, or other criminal that was either turned into a candle or a candle holder, hence the flame. Since Child has suggested that she'd easily betray the Fatui to suit her own needs, this feels like it kinda suits her. It's got that traitor vibe to it, you know? It could theoretically work for Capitano, but he has too many honor and pride and all that kind of stuff vibes going on, so I don't think it's his. Therefore, I think Arlecchino, aka the Knave, is number 7 of the Fatui Harbingers and the head of the House of Hearth Orphanage and the Hand of Glory constellation. This was not at all what I expected for Puccinella. First off, this is the same guy in the Travail trailer. You'd never know it, but that shot was just a really flattering low angle. Second, this dude has elf ears, like Klee. That makes him the 4th elf-eared character in the game, and all of them have white hair and they're small, and no, I didn't miscount. There are actually 4, I'm just not allowed to talk about number 3 yet. The other 2 are obviously Klee and Janssen. I have no idea what it means, but I am so bothered by the existence of these ears. Like, what if he's actually related to Klee? Like, maybe not directly, but Alice did say they were from a long-lived race, so what if Puccinella is another one of their race? What if he knows Alice? That's such a... I don't know what to say about that. Also, this symbol on his hat really bothers me because it looks so much like a Hilichurl mask. I mean, look at it. What are the implications of that? I don't even know. Brainworms aside, though, something neat I noticed is that his hat is not only full of feathers, but the brim is kind of structured like a pair of wings. And this is super cool because his title is The Rooster, and it also suits his bona fide beak of a nose. Like, Jesus, look at that thing. Puccinella, however, is a government official. The others call him mayor, which in my opinion is kind of a weird choice of words since mayors only really govern towns as far as I know. But Child describes him as a really good guy who he likes a lot, and he takes care of his family while he's away, but I don't know about anybody else, but I get massive Godfather vibes from Puccinella. He'll be nice to you on the surface, treat you like family, but if you say so much as one bad thing against him, you'll have gone against the family, you know? And guys like that use innocent people as leverage against their subordinates. If Puccinella is close to Child's family, then he's basically got Child on a leash. He's got leverage, and he was the one who even selected him to join the Harbingers in the first place. I find that worrisome. As for my choice of his constellation, I will concede that he could be this symbol. Now, I called it the heresy symbol and I assigned it to Dottore, but I will admit that it could also be a globus cruciger, which is a symbol of authority, and the mask could be a plague doctor's mask, but that's so obvious and boring.
Dottore is a doctor, so let's give him a plague doctor mask.
Ugh. However, I still think Puccinella is actually the plague doctor mask. And the reason is, he actually looks like a plague doctor, straight up. It's the round glasses, it's the long nose, it's the right shape. He's even got the same hat, man. It's the same thing. And just for the record, most plague doctors were not doctors. Or at least not really trained physicians. They were either new physicians or just any person who decided that they wanted to participate in treating people, like a volunteer, but they actually got paid. But the thing about plague doctors is they did treat people regardless of their income, and I actually think that suits Puccinella, because Puccinella is described by Child as actually being pretty generous. A fair and just politician that wants to earn the favor of the people, like he would effectively treat everyone equally regardless of status, so I think this still fits. I am sticking with it. He's the plague doctor mask. Also, if I might just add this, the plague doctor mask actually does look a lot like Puccinella's Commedia mask with the long, elongated beak kind of thing, so there's also that. Anyway, that's my take on Puccinella, aka the Rooster. He's the mayor of Shnezhnaya, I guess, and the number 5 of the Fatui Harbingers with the Plague Doctor Mask constellation. I'm sticking with it. This may surprise you, but there is more than one Dottore. In fact, I can count at least 4 that we've met so far. Now, according to Child, Dottore took snapshots of himself at different stages in life and then created new bodies based off of each one and gave them different responsibilities and assignments. The oldest Dottore, who I will call Dottore Prime, is this one, while a slightly younger version is the one attending Signora's memorial. Note that this is an assumption that I'm making because the exact wording was the segment in the prime of his life, which is kind of subjective about what age that is. Dottore himself seems to favor being older compared to being younger, though, so a prime age to him seems like it would be the oldest, in my opinion. But Columbina does call it a segment, so honestly it could go either way, but it's one of these two. Now, I think there are 2 different Dottores in the manga. Both are much younger and more unhinged than Dottore Prime. There's this one that attends Diluc's banquet, and then there's this one that presumably stayed in Heresies, which would be his lab kind of Fatui-based thing. It would explain the differences in their